professional bad takes merchant THD came out with an interesting set of thoughts yesterday about the current divide between Mythic Plus and Mythic Raiding, particularly centered around the effort put in the two activities as well as comparing them to the rewards that both activities are getting. What this weird take Magnet was saying was that, let's be honest, the only reason I hear of guilds disbanding after clearing Mythic is because no one wants to do Fated 2.0 and because Mythic Plus should not be giving you the same level of gear you get from Mythic Raiding, given the effort and the time commitment put in the two activities is vastly different, which then is followed up by saying Mythic Plus gear should not be equivalent to Mythic Raiding gear in its current state. I don't know whose idea it was to enable someone like a random casual to replicate the gear of a world first raider just by doing a handful of +20s. It's a terrible setup. So the point in question, going to the current rewards you get from the different types of content we have in the game right now, is that if you go, for example, and spam a bunch of +18s at the moment, you will be offered in the Great Vault some 480, 483 item level loot, which is the equivalent of Mythic Raiding gear because it ends up in the same upgrade track, which is the Myth upgrade track. Yes, you have the minor advantage if you defeat these bosses in Mythic, bosses 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, that their base item level is higher, so you save some aspect crests in upgrading them, but this deep into the season, of course, it doesn't really matter. You have like hundreds upon hundreds of aspect crests you can get, so what really matters is the base upgrade level, and doing 18s and 19s and 20s will get you the Myth track gear in the Great Vault. Now, spamming Mythic Plus instead, so doing them every day with the repeatable rewards from the loot at the end of the run, will give you 470 plus loot that can be upgraded all the way up to hero to 483 item level, which is the entry level rewards from the first few bosses of Mythic Raiding. So the main complaint lies in the disparity of effort put in the two activities versus the actual rewards. And for now, we are sticking to the tangible power rewards. So we're not talking about the titles, the mounts, the transmogs, or the achievements, just about the actual loot you can get from these activities. Once upon a time, and for a long time, the main divide between Mythic Plus and Raiding was that Raiding was going to give you better loot, higher item level loot, but it was once a week. You had a weekly lockout, you had to divide this loot for like 20 players, meaning sometimes you might have not even gotten any loot to begin with in the raid for a full week. Meanwhile, Mythic Plus had lower item level loot, it wasn't nearly as valuable, but it was spammable. You could just decide one day you're gonna be playing all afternoon or all evening doing Mythic Plus keys, possibly getting loot multiple times. That was the main divide between Mythic Plus and Raiding. Over time though, especially with the addition of the upgrade tracks in the past couple of seasons, now you have multiple ways for you to get top level, tip-top level of gear from Mythic Plus as well. So first of all, now the Mythic Plus keys can give you all the way up to, if upgraded, 483 item level, which is about 6 item levels lower than the max gear from Mythic Raiding, and then the Great Vault is now equal. The rewards from the Great Vault of Mythic Plus is now equal to the rewards of the Great Vault of Mythic Raiding. So some players are a bit disgruntled because they are wondering, hold on a second, hold on. You're telling me I can go and do 4 Ataldazar plus 18s. I can die 27 times, I can play by clicking my abilities and keyboard turning, still time the key because the key is a joke, and at the end of the week I'm gonna get 2 options for 2 items, I can get all the way up to 489. Meanwhile, if someone goes into the raid, kills Mythic Smolderon, Mythic Tindral, and Mythic Farak, at the end of the week he will have 2 options for loot of the same item level, of the same possible quality as the other guy who just went into some Ataldazars plus 18s. How is that equal? How is that balanced? That is the main complaint about the rewards right now, the difference in rewards between Mythic Plus and Raiding. Now, some players had a simple possible solution to this, which has often received some pushback, mostly by likely players who do not reach this level, which is why exactly do we stop Mythic Plus upgrades at the plus 20 level? This is a type of complaint we have often heard also not just about gear, but also about things like titles and achievements and mounts and pets, toys, transmogs, whatever you want. Why can't we go higher than just plus 20s? Why can't we go into the plus 22, plus 24, plus 25, or plus 26? Or if you can translate this into rating, why can't we start giving rewards at 3000 rating, 3200, 3400, 3600, etc, etc? Why do we stop so low? Especially considering these are the two main competitive activities for PvE in the game. So you would be wanting to add more rewards. You would be wanting to push players to go into these activities more. So one of the things you can do to give players more incentives to play is, of course, giving out more rewards. So the question is, wouldn't this be way more fair if we added Mythic Plus, gear rewards at higher level than just a measly plus 20, like, say, for example, plus 25? What if the myth upgrade track you can get in the Great Vault isn't achieved by doing plus 18s and 19s, which are laughably easy and do not correspond whatsoever with the type of reward, because mid-track gear you also get from doing Mythic Raiding, which is far harder than a plus 18, and instead you moved it all the way up to completing a plus 25. Yes, some players would still be complaining that a plus 25 is not nearly as hard as doing Mythic Tindral or something like that, but it's definitely more close than a plus 18, right? So that would be at the very least a start. Don't forget that also this is still just once a week. The spammable Mythic Plus gear you can get is still at a quite low item level. It still caps out at 483. So even if you were to give out this mid-track gear that can be upgraded all the way up to 489, it will still be only once a week from the Great Vault. And your gear has about 15 slots. Even if you cover, let's say, 5 of those with crafted gear, it will still take you 10 plus weeks from the Great Vault, over 2 months, closer to 3 months for you to have a set of gear fully covered by the Great Vault if you don't raid. And you don't get, mid-track gear from the raid, and you can only get it from the Great Vault from Mythic Plus. That's another point that can add to the value of the activity. Time, right? The time it takes you to get there. If I told you doing a Mythic Plus 18 gets you as much rewards as doing Mythic Farak, wow, that's a scandal. That's awful. How can this happen? But then, if I told you, hold on a second, killing Mythic Farak can give you gear once a week for several weeks, meanwhile, it's going to take you 4 months of getting this Mythic Farak equivalent item level from the Great Vault on just doing Mythic Plus. In that case, you're like, okay, if you get the same gear but it takes you 4 months to get what I can get in like 3 weeks, then it's more fair, right? That also makes it more fair. Not just the item level you're getting between Mythic Plus and Raiding, but also how much time it takes you to get that item level. There is, however, definitely a problem when it comes to the rewards given when it comes to raiding. We have touched on this already in our raiding specific video about missing something that makes players want to continue to raid even after progress, because the rewards are starting to lack when you start to farm the raid. Because, of course, now you have so many other ways to get top level gear. Once every couple of weeks, you can get yourself a 486 crafted piece of gear. Once every week, you can get yourself a 489 piece of gear from the Great Vault. So obviously, going back and farming the raid week after week starts to become less and less rewarding, because you have fewer and fewer item slots you need to upgrade. So it becomes more of a chore. Meanwhile, at the very least, Mythic Plus still has this carrot on a stick in the form of rating, in the form of improving your highest key completed, etc, etc, which adds some sort of extra incentive on continuing to do Mythic Plus compared to the raid. There is then the other problem, of course. There is the problem that you still have, at the end of the day, many players have pointed this out, they consider Mythic Plus their main activity. We are no longer in the boomer days of Vanilla or TBC or Wrath or Cataclysm or Mists or Warlords, where the only one end game for PvE was raiding. Now we have gotten this addition of Mythic Plus, and many players are more than happy to just dedicate their time doing only Mythic Plus and not really bothering too much with the raid. At the very best, they can spend, a couple of hours, maybe once a week, doing heroic raid rather than trying to spend more time getting into Mythic, right? And part of what makes this possible for the more competitive players who want to get into Mythic Plus is the fact that they are no longer at a massive disadvantage if they don't Mythic raid when it comes to powerful loot. Obviously, there is still going to be an overlap, right? If I were to look at, for example, the absolute best Mythic Plus players right now, and if I were to open, a bunch of players from different groups, right, all at random, here and here and here, and you look at their raiding progress, this guy is farming Mythic, this one is farming Mythic, you have this one who is farming Mythic, you have this one who is farming Mythic, you have this one who is farming Mythic, and you have this one who is farming Mythic. So it's not exactly, a common thing to have players doing super well in Mythic Plus right now without actually raiding, right? So many of these players who do high-end Mythic Plus content do also get into raiding, but many others also do not, especially if we start going down perhaps not this extreme level of keys, but even down to the title level keys. If we go down to just 27s, 28s, for example, level of keys, there are going to be even more players who don't get that much into Mythic raiding, which means if they wanted to compete at that level of Mythic Plus, they would have had to get their power from Mythic Plus only and not really from Mythic raiding. So if we took that away and we said, okay, let's go back at giving the best possible gear only from Mythic raiding and no longer from Mythic Plus, all of the players who are doing currently well, who are pushing 25 plus, but at this point 27-ish plus level keys, would have to some extent get into Mythic raiding, or they would be left behind, because then all of these people who are doing Mythic raiding would simply be stronger. They would simply have better gear. Usually every season now in this expansion, but even in Shadowlands, the number one main benefit you would gain over doing Mythic Plus only is the specific items, like for example trinkets. Right? Sometimes you have some super strong trinket coming exclusively from the raid. Generally, things like cheat death trinkets for tanks, absorb shield trinkets to stay alive at very high keys, coming from the raid, for example. Those were the only exceptions. Outside of that, 90%, the majority of the rest of your gear could have been achieved from Mythic Plus or from crafting, especially in this expansion where we made crafted gear super powerful. However, we are still left with a question though, because if we can keep Mythic Plus okay as it is right now, we are fine with this distribution of item level. If we are fine with doing plus 18s and plus 19s, giving you mid-track level gear, that we have to admit still puts Mythic raiding at a massive disadvantage in terms of quality of loot. I do think, especially given how far we have been getting Mythic Plus keys this season, past the 30 level, that reaching max gear at a plus 18 when the current highest key level is plus 32 is a bit too large of a gap. I think the initial suggestion of getting you the mid-track gear doing plus 25s is a much better solution. Players who are, of course, wanting to push high-level Mythic Plus keys would have no problem doing plus 25s to get that gear, and players who are struggling clearing plus 25s definitely did not deserve or did not need higher item level gear. If you can't even do a plus 25, obviously you weren't really going to make much use of a mid-track 489 piece of gear if you are failing plus 25s right now. So I think it is perhaps the more sensible of the solutions to stretch the possible rewards of Mythic Plus. Instead of having this level, for example, drag them down a couple of tiers and put 486 at plus 27, then put 483 at plus 25, and then the entry level mid-track at plus 23. I think this stretch would put even more emphasis. In fact, it might even help make Mythic Plus even more healthy in terms of players wanting to get into it for pushing higher and higher keys, because the rewards are still there and they don't just dry out completely as soon as you reach plus 20 level. That, I think, is the biggest change you could have to make Mythic Plus feel more fair and feel like you are earning your rewards better in Mythic Plus, compared to literally being thrown the rewards just by doing a plus 18, which at this point is just far too easy to reward you with the best possible upgrade track item level, the mid-track item level. If we were looking to change it from the other side, so not from the Mythic Plus perspective, but from the raid perspective, well, you know, we have the problems that we have talked about before in our raiding video. We could add extra weekly quests or objectives to complete, extra achievements to complete on the bosses to give you better loot, rarer loot, extra items to put on your gear, like extra sockets or tertiary stats you can put on your gear to make it even stronger, that you can get only from raiding, thus making raid still valuable deeper in the season, for example. Those would still be features that could still apply to making raiding more relevant and feel like it can still be rewarding after a while and not just fall off completely in terms of the amount and also the quality of the rewards you are getting from the activity and from the time commitment that you put into the activity itself. So this was today's point on this Sunday, trying to figure out if this situation pointed out by the Bad Take Master THD has a point about the current divide between Mythic Plus and Mythic Raiding in terms of rewards, both from a quantity perspective as well as a quality perspective between the two activities. I do, in the end, even if I might not agree with the general idea of the statement, do believe that we should change slightly, if anything, the manner in which the rewards are given and the place in which they are given to. Like, for example, stretching out the Mythic Plus key levels needed for certain rewards in the Great Vault, for example. However, this was my take, and my take only, so I'm going to let you have your own takes down in the comments concerning what do you think about the current situation in terms of rewards being given out by both Mythic Plus and Mythic Raiding. If you think they are both doing okay and don't need any changing, or if perhaps you too think we could have some adjustments put in both activities in terms of the rewards given. With this out of the way though, we are now saying goodbye to each other on this Sunday. We're starting as usual the goodbyes by thanking all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, still be given completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. Now, with these pointless things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I love the masochistic take of not drinking for long enough so that when you finally drink, it feels even better.